Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for the evening, along with Beth in the Zoom room. Jennifer and her husband are off hiking in South America for their anniversary. So she's been, but they're going to be there for the whole month, right, Beth?
No, they come back in a couple days.
In a couple of days. Okay. They've been there since the beginning of
Yeah.
December, though. So we're excited to have so many of you here join us this evening on this cold Friday night and right before Christmas. So we really appreciate the fact that so many of you are showing up tonight when you could be Christmas shopping or wrapping or baking cookies or whatever it is that you do. So we're just so appreciative that you're here. We've got a couple of announcements before we start the evening. Again, we want to remind everyone this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group on Facebook and are shared on our YouTube channel. Again, as a reminder, we like everyone to make sure that you follow us on the Facebook happy hour group. If you don't, go ahead and do so. That's where the replay will be listed. Please remain on mute, raise your hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You may post your questions or comments in the chat. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988. What do we have, Beth?
Well, let's see. We have a reminder about our regular programming. Happy Hour comes to you the first and the third Friday of each month. Various guests telling their stories and keeping us up to date in what's going on in the adoption community. We also have Dr. Joyce leading a reunion support group, Putting Yourself Together After Reunion. That meets monthly on a Tuesday, the second or third Tuesday of the month generally. And we really appreciate the time that she gives us in helping us navigate reunion. We also have Amy Seek, who facilitates our First Families, Birth Parents Journeying Together group. They meet monthly on the second Thursday of the month. And we hear lots of good things from this group, and we really appreciate Amy. And then you may notice here that we now have an additional program to offer you, facilitated by Dr. Liz. And Marcie, I will let you tell our audience about that.
Okay, thanks, Beth. I appreciate that. Yeah, we are so super excited to announce this evening that Dr. Liz DeVetta will be joining NAAP as one of our program facilitators. And, you know, we had Danielle Gaudette for the last year, and we were looking for another facilitator. And Liz and I, Liz, where are you? You're off mute somewhere.
I'm here.
Oh, there she is. Okay. She had been on my mind as someone who possibly might be interested. And we've had a little bit of dialogue about that. And we started talking about this in August when I was in Key West and we wanted to get together. And so I'm just excited and we're so honored to have you as part of the NAAP team. So I wanted you to just come on and share a little bit about, you know, briefly your story and how you got here and what our attendees can expect.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcie. So there's lots of folks in this room that I know that I'm so happy to see in this community, in this group tonight, and lots of folks that know me either through various social media channels or because of having participated in some of my ongoing Migrating Toward Wholeness workshops or have seen my one-woman show Unmothered. But for those of you that may not be super familiar with me yet, I am a domestic infant adoptee. I was born in New Jersey and adopted in 1977 during closed records. I did not have any access to any of my birth records until 2017, when I received a copy of my original birth certificate on my 40th birthday. How is that for some magical universe stuff? And so at that point, I started to feel real because I knew that I came from an actual person. I knew what her name was, and I was able to start to think about who I was in a different way than I had before, which I think a lot of people can relate to. And so um, up to that point, and then after that point, so much of what I have been working towards is becoming integrated through storytelling and being able to tell my own story in a cohesive and comprehensive way so that it makes sense to me, but so that it also gives voice to the experiences that so many of us adoptees have internally but can't always articulate. And so that's where my one woman show came from. And that's kind of how Marcie and I first, well, we've been connected through happy hour prior to Unmothered, but then we really connected the first time that she came to see Unmothered when I performed it in Nashville in the summer of 2023. And we started talking, and we started to deepen our connection and our friendship, and realized that there's such an important there's so it's so important for us as people touched by adoption. And like, that's kind of like a cheesy phrase, but that's the thing that's coming to mind right now. But it's so important for us to be able to connect and come together in community and share our stories and share our experiences and have ways to navigate them so that we don't feel isolated and we don't feel so alone. And so then, fast forward a bunch of months later, and we were talking about how I could get more involved and what that might look like. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we finally caught up, and she said, "Hey, we want you to come facilitate for us this year." And I was like, "Yes, let's do it." And so I'm super excited to be able to monthly be here. And I'm going to be doing Migrating Toward Wholeness, Rewriting Adoption Narratives in the Constellation. And it's going to be a monthly therapeutic writing to redefine and rewrite adoption narratives for clarity, communication, and healing in community. And so I'm really hopeful that y'all will join me on the last Thursday of every month, starting on January 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And what you can expect is some really powerful writing in community that will be trauma informed and directed to whoever's showing up on each particular session. Everything is really individualized in my Migrating Toward Wholeness process. And it's deeply, there's deeply embedded in it are the 7 steps of trauma healing. And those of you that are coming to the first event on January 30th will learn a little bit more about that. And if you have questions about that later, we can talk about that later. But I'm super excited to be able to offer this to our community and to get people writing and processing through some of the stuff that you might not have had a chance to say out loud before. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I can't wait to see everyone in a month.
Yeah, we are so honored to have you. So thank you so much. And Dr. Bliss, I just want to add just a couple little points too for our attendees and this is inclusive. I mean, in other words, it's not, obviously it's adoptee focused, but birth parents are welcome. Anyone in the constellation, and you don't have to be writing a book. It's not about, I mean, it could be anything, just your journaling, your thoughts, however, but it's an opportunity for anyone in the constellation, and even those in the assisted reproduction could benefit from this this program as well. So we just want to make sure that all of you join us. We want to support Liz, and in January, mark your calendars, and we're just on fire about this new program. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey. All righty. Stay with us. You'll be back at the end of the evening. It gives me the great pleasure now. We're going to shift gears, and I want to welcome Greg Gentry back as a spotlight guest on Adoption Happy Hour. Hey, Greg, where are you?
I'm right here, Marcie. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
That's just great. Thank you. Just great. So what I'd like for you to do, Greg, if you'd go ahead and just, for those of you that don't know Greg, go ahead and reintroduce yourself a little bit, and let's share a little bit about your story and what's going on with you.
Sure. Thanks very much. I'm a domestic infant adoptee from the baby scoop era. I was born in 1969 in San Diego and also adopted in San Diego. Spent the first 37 years of my life in California, and I've since moved to the East Coast where I live in New Hampshire. I see people on here who are very familiar to me, even some people locally that I know. It's very exciting to see everyone. My story, I think, like a lot of adoptees in the baby scoop era, was kind of a placid unknowing. By that I mean, seemed to be kind of even, but there was probably something going on that was right under the level of awareness for me. By that I mean, there were definitely things that were eventually, as I got older, starting to kind of come out in me that we might call trauma responses, that I was unaware where these might come from, what they were. They just made me feel like I was being a reactive person at certain times in my adulthood, and eventually led to a serious breakdown of my most important relationships, including the eventual dissolution of my marriage after 29 years. But growing up, I would say, again, this, like other baby scoop era adoptees, I think everything felt okay, but I felt kind of different. I felt like I definitely had different interests, different things that were appealing to me, different talents than my family around me. They had a lot of industrious talents. They were able to make things. They were very crafty, good with their hands, producing stuff, things I would just kind of marvel at and stare at. And, I knew from age 10 I was adopted, but I always was kind of aware of this gap between us in terms of what they could do and what I could do. They never made me feel bad about that, but I always kind of felt like I wish I could do some of these things. My talents were more inward or more cerebral in a way, I guess I'll say. And it's not that those came out so much in my childhood, other than in special interests I had. Eventually, I was diagnosed on the autism spectrum and found out that a lot of the things I was really interested in very small, peculiar ways as a child were really related to the fact that I'm autistic. So other kids were talking about sports and things, and I was talking about sundials and telegraph keys and boomerangs and strange things like this. Strange meaning that they were very specific to one person versus something that was going on in the wider culture there. But I would say that my parents, if they erred, it would have been on the side of wanting too much to assure me I was no different than the way they viewed their older biological daughters. And the effect of that really led me to feel like any differences I did have, they weren't unkind about them, but they were just kind of not discussed. And I think the effort was there to make me feel comfortable and accepted and loved, probably to a detrimental degree, to the point where I didn't feel like the things that were uniquely mine were actually going to be something that were attributed to me. There was no discussion of adoption in my household. No one ever talked to me. Even to this day, I've only had a couple of very serious conversations with my parents about the fact that I'm an adoptee. And growing up, it certainly wasn't something that was discussed. It wasn't something, I think, common in that era to talk to your kids about. I think the prevailing narrative was don't bring it up, or tell them it's kind of finished. And I do think my parents viewed it as a very finished in the past sort of event. And they would say, you were adopted, and I, along with other adoptees, I think, would say, I am adopted. And by that, of course, it's the present tenseness of this, that it's ongoing. It may have been something they thought was over with in 1969. And for me, that was when it started, or even the point of the decision of relinquishment, when things were set off in my nervous system as an infant, and even before that set a different trajectory for me than just saying, this is done, this is in the past, and now I just move on from that. I think that it's common for us to go into our adulthood and realize, at least in these, again, I speak as a baby scoop era adoptee, a lot of us go through our lives and we hit about 50 years old, and suddenly we come out of the fog, and it is a tremendous experience. And I speak to so many people who have something like that to say, that they were fine until they weren't fine, to quote a young friend of mine from a different generation of adoptees. these adoptees felt like they were okay to a degree, but they didn't realize that there was something that was wrong that would be attributed to the fact of being relinquished and being adopted. And for me, whatever defects I perceived in myself, I attributed to not being a good person. Like, oh, I have an anger reaction, or I have an impatience reaction, or I had a flight reaction. I ran away from some things. In my marriage, I would sometimes run away from situations, and it was very distressing to my wife at the time. Why do you do that? And I would promise not to do it. I didn't realize that my trauma responses were activated. And because there was no one helping me out to understand what it meant for me to be an adopted person anywhere in my life, then I was left feeling like there was a brokenness in me that had to do with something inferior. So you can imagine this coming out of the FOG event, feeling this was 2021, when suddenly the world exploded for me. I found the online adoptee community in July of 2021. I came out of the FOG that same month, and it was staggering because suddenly I was hearing all of the discussions people were having. I was seeing them online. I was seeing words that seemed to hint at things that were occurring in me about awarenesses I dimly had, but had no words for. And suddenly people were talking about that. And I had never really spoken to adoptees before. And I hear that over and over again as somebody who facilitates a lot in the adoptee community. We go through decades of our lives, even the younger adoptees, without talking about it, without really meeting, so to say, other adoptees. We may know a couple growing up like I did, but the engagement of them about this subject is very limited. So I was certainly like that. I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. And the few people I do know who were adopted, we didn't talk about it together. We just kind of, it was viewed almost like a little tiny club. Oh, you're in that club too, so am I. And that was the end of the discussion. There was no elaboration upon it. So to find in 2021, this community online, at kind of the height of what was happening with COVID, suddenly being in these communities, seeing people talk about things that were just blowing my mind, that I had no idea there were other people going through this. I'd been in reunion with my birth mother since 2006. And interestingly, later on that same year of 2021, when I came out of the FOG, I fell out of reunion with her, and it's still broken up to this point right now. I don't know when that will be mended. I hope someday it can be. But I was suddenly talking to people who were expressing things I only had a dim awareness of or had no words for. And I still think that's the greatest gift, at least in the adoptee community that I've seen, is it gives people not only a context and a platform, but a whole vocabulary. It continues to grow. People explore subjects, they explore conceptualities, and they gain this language that gives them a facility and an ability to talk about what they've gone through. And that's exciting too, for somebody who can see that now, welcome other people into the community, help them to start to feel comfortable talking about their situation, their circumstances, the things that have been present in their lives that they've never had anyone to discuss these situations with. So coming out of the FOG in 2021 was a big event for me. Obviously, it's an understatement to say that. It was not a serene thing. It was a kind of a momentary thing for me. It happened on a single night after months of wondering about things and thinking about things, and suddenly being confronted with the very real awareness of the magnitude of loss that I had suffered as an adopted person. So when that all slammed into me, it naturally came out in every way imaginable in my life, in terms of how I was present in my family at the time, how I was present for my job at the time. I couldn't think about things the same way anymore. And it's still that way, to the extent that it means that if we talk about FOG or the adoptee awareness model, even, there are these steps, these progressions. And as you pass through these gates and into a deepening awareness of it, you realize you're on the other side of something you can't go back into. So I knew that my life, in effect, was over in terms of what it had been, how I'd understood myself. And everything at that point became a question of self-reinterpretation. And I think that's why a lot of people start to write. I won't speak for all the authors here, but I know every time I've tried to write or wanted to speak about the experience of being an adoptee. It's to interpret or articulate my interpretation of myself as I gain more awareness of it. So I'll go into a situation and talk to adoptees, and it's always expanding my understanding of who I am, which is retrojective. And by that, I mean, it causes you to go back into your story and how you understood yourself your entire life and look again at those things that made you what you were and see if they come out differently in terms of your understanding. So I mentioned trauma responses, reactivity that I might have had. And that increased when I got more into adulthood. But let's say I now had an understanding of that. I've been able to go back into my story and look at things, say, were there instances of this that I exhibited? Or did I have a certain beholdenness or indebtedness or gratitude complex towards my parents? A fawning response, in other words. Yeah, I definitely think I did. And by the time I was gaining awareness of that, that means that my story no longer is just a cold chronicle or sequence of this happened, and this happened, and this happened. It's continually me applying what I'm learning even today and every time I go into the adoptee community and looking at my story again. So what the result is when you tell your story, let's say you're on a podcast or you're speaking with someone, and you get the chance to tell it again at a later time, you may tell it differently. And it's not because you're fabricating it, it's because your understanding of the significance of what happened to you is expanding. So I look at it as if there are opportunities for people to tell their stories more than one time, they'll probably see some kind of progression in there. Sometimes it's a regression in terms of this fighting, this level of awareness that you're trying to come to that causes you to reinterpret your entire experience. So basically, since 2021, I've been in the online and also the in-person adoptee communities with Adoptees Connect. I think the most important thing that happened to me online was when I was invited into a group called Fireside Adoptees, which was founded in August 2021 by Amanda Baum and 2 other adoptees. And Fireside was the place where I suddenly was in these conversations. And I, for the first time, had kind of a platform or an opportunity to talk to people one-on-one in settings like this, basically a gallery setting, a Zoom call setting. So my job, which was like so many of us online for years during COVID, had prepared me to be somebody who could do Zoom well. Doing dozens of Zoom calls a week in my job made the transition to a Zoom space for adoptees really easy. And I found that I had a comfort to doing that, to speaking to people that way. And Amanda in Fireside said, I would like to offer you the opportunity to start interviewing people. I thought, oh, that's very interesting. I hadn't done anything like that in my entire life, but suddenly she was giving me the chance to talk to people in the community. So I remember thinking, all right, I guess I'm going to do this. And that first interview, I spent hours trying to figure out what are the questions going to be. I had lists of questions written out. I talked to the guest before we did this and made sure things lined up for what he was expecting to be asked about. It was very, very tightly knit and very methodical how I did this. And I think that was probably October of 2021. I've done about a little more than 40 interviews, I think, since then with adoptees in the Fireside space. And, you know, what's funny is the way I approach it is very different now. I think I needed that kind of structure at the beginning of this to feel like I knew where I was going with talking with someone. And I still write a lot of that stuff out, but I don't expect to use a lot of it. And I don't use a lot of it. It sits in front of me like a guide and something that kind of reassures me. I have an anchor there. But the fact is, the better you get at listening to what the person sharing is expressing, the more organic the interview becomes, and the more spur of the moment, so to say, it becomes. Not shooting from the hip in that sense, but you're just able to follow the flow that somebody might naturally be taking and how they're expressing their story. So that's been a great joy for me in Fireside and in a couple other venues to be able to talk to people about their stories, because I feel like that's the big thing that adoptees can contribute. Because you'll note that there are many people now speaking about the experience of being adopted all over the world. And for those of us in America, again, around my age, I'm now 55 years old, but I was about 52 when I came out of the fog. We're finding for the first time that we have a voice, and that society isn't, well, they make different things of that voice that they've been largely kind of invalidating to adult adoptees. They want to adopt children, but they get angry at the thought of that your child will be me one day. They'll have a voice too. They'll be saying things like I'm saying. So time to listen and see what the experience of being an adopted person really is like. And there's a groundswell of that. And I think that it's wonderful to see groups like NAAP coming together, providing bigger platforms for places for people to talk about their stories. All the podcasts that are out there, all the memoirs that are out there, people are getting stories out about what it's like to be adopted individuals. And it no longer can be ignored. There are still going to be people who discount it or downplay it, unfortunately, or diminish what we're really saying. But at the same time, we're not backing down from that. We're continuing to push on the fact that, you know, there are things that people need to be aware of. So if I said at the beginning of this conversation, I kind of had a placid or smooth sort of life experience, the more I've gone back and reinterpreted that, as I've gained more of these interpretive tools, the more I see that maybe that wasn't exactly what was going on when I was little and growing up. There were other dynamics in play. And they've allowed me now to see, as somebody, well, in my middle age, that even adoption that is considered good has a lot going on. And it's still the fact that there's a person who is relinquished at the center of it, or should be at the center of it. Any adoption story should be the center voice of the adoptee. But the fact that I was suddenly aware that everything in my experience led up to me saying, well, did they really communicate with you about this? And the answer was no. Nobody talked to me about this. Nobody gave me an opportunity to talk about this. Even when I found out at age 10, after that, there wasn't any follow-up to talk about this. It was just, again, transactional in the past, over and done with. And they weren't pushing me to move on, but it was dropped. It was effectively never spoken of again until I got closer to the time of wanting to go into reunion. And when I told them I found my birth mother, that was the first very serious conversation about adoption. And it was in the sense of they felt hurt and betrayed. And how could you do this? How could you want to do this? Why would you do this? And I think a lot of people on the call can relate to having to reassure their parents that they're still important while you're wanting to know about your history and your roots. And I guess I thought at that point, okay, now this is all out in the open, and they can support me in it. We still didn't talk about it. We got more and more angry about it and bitter towards each other. And eventually a lot of that relationship kind of crumbled. And it's been back to varying degrees, but really I could see finally that what I thought maybe was my good adoption experience, right below the surface, was this cemented in narrative of how people who are adopted should be, that they should be, you know, like me, they should see themselves as an answer to prayer, as a gift. I know these are triggering words, so I apologize for people hearing that, who've had to hear that in their lives like I have. That I was told things like that. I was told it was part of God's plan that I came to be there. Eventually I was able to turn that around on my mom and say, in order to be an answer for your prayers, I had to lose everything. Why doesn't that seem to be part of our conversation here? And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, again, there's this prevailing narrative in society that adoption looks like this, and it's a good thing, and it's always this way, or it's usually this way, or I know somebody who it turned out really well for. So what are you sitting there complaining about, or what's going on? And really, there are people who just have never had the chance to say, the experience went this way for me. Why can't I talk about that? Why is it so not well received culturally, societally, around the world even? And I'm so glad to be a part of organizations that are speaking up about that. And I know some of you on here are genuinely people who have been committed to that cause of exposing what this is like and doing things worldwide for the benefit of adoptees. Again, the centering of the adoptee voice is so important because we're the people who are the experts of living this life, and we're the people that have had the least say in anything that's going on. We certainly didn't have agency in this happening to us. And the fact of people later on still not wanting really to hear from us and kind of, I think, wishing we would go away or calling us all kinds of things is only, I think, served to show that the narrative as it stands right now is kind of this really, it's an unwieldy and oppressive thing for a lot of adoptees to go through this, knowing that socially you can't go out and just say what this is like without expecting somebody to correct you, or to say, but these are your real parents, but that's your real family, but you were little, you can't remember those people anyway. They didn't want, the things that I know that guests on here who've been on here will have said and brought up as well. So the importance for me of adoptee stories and giving people that space is what's paramount, which is, again, what I love to do in Fireside. I don't consider myself a content producing person. Maybe I don't have pages of things that people can go read that I've written that are amazing or newfangled or anything like this. I'm learning things from people in real time and trying to assimilate those things. But I feel like the thing that I'm best suited for, if I can do it at all, is to let people have the space to talk about their individual experiences. That's the vital thing for me. And it feels minor to me in terms of it's important because I think people have never done it, and I want them to be able to do it, and I want them to feel encouraged in doing it. I don't consider myself somebody who's out there at the forefront of anything or moving or shaking anything. Just I certainly want to be in with the causes that are out there to reform or to change big parts of the narrative here. I'm not sure that I have a significant voice in that sense, but I do like to hope that I can be, as much as possible, some sort of ambassador from our community, some kind of a bridge in our community for adoptees and maybe for people outside the constellation to start to listen a little more, to start to hear what the very thoughtful people among us are really saying about the experience of being adopted. So that's, I guess, been my contribution, if I have any at all, has been just talking to people, listening to people, receiving people, welcoming them. And what's interesting about that is time and again, people will reach out and talk about how meaningful that is to them. They'll say, oh, you interview so many people. And I said, I would like to interview you. And they said, but I didn't write anything. I don't have anything important to say. And it's heartbreaking because I didn't write anything. I don't have anything super amazing to say, but everyone's story is sacred for the individuality that it is. And the fact that it's your personal account of your life and your way, again, of articulating and expressing for yourself what's going on. And there is a magic in being able to tell that to people. It's a scary thing as well. And that's the other thing I'd like to bring out for people who do interviews is you may sit down and interview with somebody and have all the intention in the world of sharing your story one way. And as soon as the record button is on, you may say something completely different. And I want to say that that's very natural, or it's very expected among, I think, adopted people, because we do hold so much that gratitude and fawning that we can so much fall prey to, that you, despite your best intentions there, may end up saying something that doesn't at all express how you thought you were going to go into this. That's another reason why it's important, if you can, to tell your story more than once. Don't feel bad if that happens to you. If you think, I'm going to go in, I'm going to tell, there were certain things that were good, certain things that were bad, and all you end up saying is things were great, they were wonderful, I had the best people in my life, my parents were wonderful, and then the button to end the recording goes off and you think, why didn't I say what this was really like? It's hard. It's hard being somebody who, first of all, society doesn't want to hear you say those things, but it's hard to get them out of yourself because you think, oh, do you gaslight yourself? Was it really that bad? Was it really something I should be talking about that way? What if they're upset at me? I think people can relate with that, right? What if my family's upset at me? I still do this. I go on podcasts, talk to people, I get off there and I go, what if they hear what I said? You know, what if my birth mother, who I'm still struggling about going back into reunion with, what if she hears what I said about the fact that I'm angry that she pulled away from me? What if she never comes back then? What if I have reunion with her and then she leaves again? What if my adopted mother hears this conversation and hears me say, why didn't they talk to me about this more? Why didn't they give me space for this? So for everybody who does have a story you want to get out there, realize that these again are all very natural, normal things. And I think the best that a podcaster or somebody who wants to interview you can do is just help you feel comfortable there, help you feel like however you're going to tell your story, that's the individuality of it. And there will be a chance to tell it again if you feel like, oh, that wasn't what I thought was going to come out of me. It is, again, a difficult thing to tell your story as an adopted person. There's a lot of factors in there. There's a lot of risk in there. There's a lot of exposure. And I feel like even me, after telling it however many times I've told it, I still get scared of some of the things I think I'm going to say or that I did say, or I wonder if that's the part they'll hear and they'll rewind it and listen to that again. So I would encourage everybody to get your story out there, to contact somebody if you're interested in telling your story. It's not meant to pressure you into doing that, but realize that I think it will help you getting it out there, just like there's so many people encouraging people to write. I'm more of a verbal processor myself, so I tend to have a lot of words. Sometimes despite being shy, I tend to have a lot of words, and it's the processing. If you have a way to get it out there, then I would encourage you to do that and realize there will be other opportunities also available for you to do it. And it doesn't have to be one you think is a super amazing story, because it is super amazing that it's your story. And it doesn't have to be that it was full of the most incredible things or the most tragic things that could have happened. Just accept what it is as your story and realize that it's valuable for that sake. And there is, as I said, there's this growing pool of memoirs and of podcasts, people getting stories out. Academically, there are people doing great work now at academic levels for adoption who are adoptees. In the therapeutic realm, there are therapists who are adoptees who are doing great work as well. So there is this collective mass of material that it's self-supporting. It's like a web. And the more it's built up, the more you contribute to it in your own way with what happened to you, the bigger of structure it gets. And it gets harder for a society that's been kind of dismissive of us to ignore things like that. So I feel like having said all this and probably being able to go on all night, but saying the same few things over and over, that people would feel like I'm about the stories, I'm about the narratives, I'm about getting that conversation out there. Other people will hear you and they will resonate with that as well, because people need validation. We haven't been heard as adoptees for very long, right? Some of us never in our lives have really been heard as the adopted person we are. You receive that validation. You also hear that your story is impacting somebody. Sometimes they'll contact you and say, this thing you said. And you may think, oh, I didn't know that was profound or anything. They'll just say that felt like what things were like for me. That's really important that you said that. Now I'm thinking about this in turn. And it builds. So I would just encourage again everybody to do that if you can. If you can't, it is not a problem either. I don't want to make everyone feel like they have to do this. It's more if you choose to do this and want to do this, I understand. But the other thing about being a facilitator in a space, whether it's in a NAAP space or in a fireside adoptee space, is you accept people at the stage where they are at And you don't try to push anybody any further or any harder than is necessary. Just accept them where they are. They need to feel comfortable where they are and accepted where they are. And if they do choose to come and reflect on their story a certain way and get it out there, that's great. And if not, that's also okay. If they choose to come into a call and have their camera off, that's fine. They're listening. They're receiving something as well. So the other great thing, again, is, as I mentioned, besides just hearing people's stories, is facilitation. And that's something I really enjoy doing in adoptee spaces, is sitting in a room like a Zoom call, for example, and having the chance to get people in dialogue with each other, or to introduce concepts to them or people to them so that they can be edified by that. And I feel like those are the two things I guess I'm known for, if anything at all, is talking to people and then facilitating people as they talk to each other. And I feel like I've gone on and on. I don't want to go on forever and ever, but I do want to say this. In the course of doing things like this, in the course of being involved in Fireside Adoptees for 3 years now and in other spaces, it's fatiguing at times, and there are things in your life that come up that can be challenging emotionally. There are things that you need space for as a person to pull back and take that time to assess your own life and figure out where things are and whether or not you need to work on certain things or just to rest. I take time to do that. I'm not saying immersed in this 24/7 all the time. I somehow know when I've had enough and need to take some space for myself. And we call this, of course, self-care, and we want to do it and work it into our lives in a regular cadence so that we don't burn out, so that when things that are challenging, really big things come up that are challenging, that we've got a support system in place and a way to take care of ourselves and a way to offer ourselves some grace and kindness. And I think that's another thing that I would encourage people to do too, if you are involved in the community or any area of your life, there is to take that time when you need it to regroup for yourself, to explore the things that you need to do. And I think there are people on the call here who would probably agree with that, and that there's a need sometimes to step back and to be good to yourselves, always to be good to yourselves, but sometimes it requires a little more focus there. So I want to thank NAAP for the opportunity to speak here. And I also want to say that with an organization like this, there are people putting a lot into this, and they don't take a lot of breaks. And sometimes I think that they're as aware as we are that there's a time for something else that might be needed. So I want to welcome Marcie back here, because I think, Marcie, there might be something that you'd like to say about self-care.
Thank you, Greg. And I just want to thank you once again for joining us this evening, sharing your story, and always being supportive of adoptees and everyone in the constellation and the work that you do in the community. It's invaluable. And I'm excited and I'm sad at the same time. And that's why we wanted to have tonight, we wanted to talk about some changes to NAAP and changes in the future. And Greg touched on one of them, and that's self-care. And that's knowing when your coffee pot is empty and you need to take a break or step back. And most of you that know my background and my story, obviously I'm a birth mom in reunion since 2008, married, found the birth father first, got married, went on a search, found our daughter. She moves in with us, and I'm thinking everything's happy, and it falls apart. And the adoption community came to my rescue. It was this community that got me through all of that and supported me through all the heartaches of a reunion gone bad, a marriage gone bad, a whole family that should have been rejoicing and finding each other 30 years later, and it was nothing but a nightmare, and it's continued to be. And the only thing that I knew was I had this community, and it was this community that got me back on my feet and helped me and it was along with Jennifer, start NAAP, or a place with others that we can all come to. And as Greg was talking about, share our stories. And, you know, as moms, as adoptees, we've been silenced for so long. And it's so important that we have these safe spaces where we can go and share our stories and step out. And whether we just stay in the background and don't say a word and don't participate, or whether we engage, it doesn't matter, because we're all accepted right where we're at with our stories, right? So I say all this, you know, for 15 years, I've been in this community, and I continue to be proud of it and love it. And it's been there for me. But with, like I said, I don't even know how to verbalize this. I've just come to the point where a year ago, most of you know that I found out I got a surprise DNA test. And after 15 years of being a mom and helping others reunite and going into reunions and supporting adoptees, come to find out, I didn't know who I was, and my father was not my father. And in an instant, my life changed. And at 68 years old, I realized that I was, you know, I find out that I was raised by non-biological people for 68 years and never knew it. Very like an adoptee, right? Like an LDA. And it's really been difficult for me. And I am in reunion with my family, but this thing has tentacles on it. And I'm not the only one that it affected. It affected my new family. It affected my daughter, my raised daughter. And it's like a wildfire that's taken off now. And I have made a decision, and I spoke with the board about it, and I've done a lot of soul searching, and just think it's time now, after 5 years, that I step back and take care of me. Because right now, it's just really difficult to even just get up and get through the day. And I've did a lot of thinking about it. And you know, Adoption Happy Hour wasn't even supposed to exist for 5 years. It was just a fluke. It was just something that was temporary while we got through COVID, and we could go back to having conferences, and it just took off. And I'm thankful. And you know, all the connections in the last 5 years, all the people that I've met from across the world, I'm so thankful. But for Marcie right now, I have to say that I've kind of reached the point where I have to step back and take care of me. So I went to a very close friend of mine who advised me, and I've asked Greg to step up. And I've always wanted Adoption Happy Hour to be adoptee led anyway. That was the goal. And so I'm excited. Greg is officially going to be taking over Adoption Happy Hour as host beginning in January. And I will be stepping back from these responsibilities to take care of me and my family. So I hope you all will be supportive of Greg and give him your best. And I'll be in the community still, but I am going to take a sabbatical and step back for about 6 months. And we'll reevaluate in another 6 months. But I think it's just important now that it's time that I pass the baton. And so I hope you all will be supportive of that. And I just wanted to publicly make that announcement. And Greg is just, you know, I know he's excited about this. He's already got his guest list, fired up. And I just hope that all of you, thank you for, coming in all these years and being supportive and I hope you'll continue to be supportive of NAAP. And where is Dr. Liz? She's still here too. So I just wanted to share that with you and say thank you for allowing me to come into your living rooms for all these years. And I'm a little nervous, little scared. I mean, Adoption Happy Hour has been my baby from the very beginning, and it's kind of hard to let that go. So I didn't take this. I mean, this has been the thought and the conversations, with Beth and Jennifer and the board. It's been ongoing, and I just finally reached the point where I think I just need to do me for a while. I'm going to be turning 70 at the first of the year. And so that's kind of says a lot too, that, there's a lot of things that I still want to do. But I think I can trust that I'm putting Adoption Happy Hour into really good hands. And I hope you all will be supportive. And I love you. So we're probably we're at the 8 o'clock hour anyway. We can go ahead and open that up for questions now. And these questions can be for me, they can be for Greg, they can be for Dr. Liz, Beth, anyone. We just want to have an open forum like we normally do. But this will be my last evening here on Adoption Happy Hour for a while. Thank you. And somebody needs to say something really quick so I don't embarrass myself and burst